Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Like Everything Else podcast, with the podcast where we use art to talk about literally everything else. I'm your host, Mo, and this week we're going to be talking about liberation. So, the definition of liberation is as follows. I'm going to be using the Cambridge Dictionary, and so that reads an occasion when something or someone is released or made free. And so, that definition is kind of the one I'm going to be working with, and I want to kind of have a pretty cool conversation about what that might look like, what that might entail, and yeah. So let's hop into our first work of art that we're going to use to talk about just this. Alrighty, so for our first work of art, we're going to be talking about a movie / musical. I guess it depends on your definition. But it was a really good movie, and that movie is called RRR. And so this movie was released in 2022, and it is indeed over 3 hours long. But it is well worth it, and I highly, highly recommend it. So I'm going to talk briefly about the movie. I'm obviously not going to be talking about it beat by beat because the movie is 3 hours long, but I want to give you a brief synopsis of kind of what goes on in the movie, because that's kind of going to be what I'm using to talk about things later in the episode. So this movie is about two freedom fighters set in pre-independence India, and we kind of see them both seeking to free someone or something or some people. And so over the course of the movie, you kind of see them befriend each other and talk about how they kind of separately talk about the ways in which they want to see a freer people, or they want better for the people. And the definition of people differs between the two of them, but nonetheless, they both really, really do want to ensure that they are like someone is freed. And it's a really, really cool film. It's a really, really beautiful film. You kind of see our characters, Raj and Beam. So Beam seeks out to free someone who's been taken from his tribe, and Raj seeks out to help his hometown or home village against British rule, because y'all know the British. And yeah, throughout this film, you kind of see something rather fascinating. You see Raj learning from Beam, and Beam learning from Raj. It's a really cool kind of working in tandem type of relationship, because even though I've read about how this is a fictionalized relationship between these two freedom fighters that are technically real people in like Indian history, but like I don't believe they didn't actually meet like this, like they show in the film. And I do still think it's a cool kind of idea of what could have happened, or a cool like reimagining of things, of like what would it have been like if they knew each other. And I think that's really fascinating, because just reading like based on the history, and you can kind of see this in the movie as well, they come from very like their backgrounds seem really, really rather different. And so it's interesting to kind of see what them kind of coming to befriend each other and all that stuff looks like. So yeah, I don't want to spoil anything terribly much. There's so many cool things that happen in this movie, and I do recommend watching it. So even if you have because yes, it is 3 hours, but like even if you got to break it up, I feel like there are some like very good like break points. So it's like if you need to take a break, you can, but the movie is well worth the 3 hours. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, watch it. But that is not going to be the end of our conversation, because there's another work of art that I also want to talk about. So let's hop right over to it. Alrighty, so our next work of art is actually a documentary. It's a short documentary, but it is called Let It Bring Hope, Bohemians versus Palestine. And so this is a documentary that can be found on YouTube, and I will link it in my description below. It's 22 minutes. It's not very long. It's really easy to be able to like sit through in one sitting. I was about to say it's easy to watch, but I would be lying if I said I didn't cry while watching this. Um, but it is a beautiful documentary. This documentary was released in 2024, and so as you all know about the genocides happening over in Palestine, there's so many things happening. In this documentary, there was a Palestinian football club that flew to Dublin to play a solidarity match with a football club in Dublin called the Bohemians. And it was really, really cool to see both of the teams kind of get get to know each other and get acclimated with each other through this match. And so I do think it was really, really powerful to kind of witness and hear a lot of the players talk about their experience. And you see also in the documentary both the folks from Ireland and the folks from Palestine kind of talking to each other, or at least acknowledging like the similarities between their oppression, because Palestine was especially at this time and currently is still being in the famine. And then of course, if you know the history of Ireland, they were also in the forced famine. And so you see them kind of at least talking about these similarities. And it's really, really fascinating to kind of see them connect on this level and to kind of put all of this hope and this power and this desire to see a free Palestine kind of happening in this documentary. And so I want to talk about what liberation actually looks like. So let's get into the conversation. So let's talk about it. Liberation is described as freeing someone or people or something from someone else. And I think it is so fascinating how both in the movie RRR and in the documentary Let It Bring Hope, that the idea of freedom is and liberation and what that looks like is so important, because there's something that happens in the I guess not necessarily spoiler, or maybe a spoiler, but for both, I'm going to say something that happened in both the movie and also something that was commented on in the documentary. I think so many people believe liberation can only look one way. And it's almost like it's always expected to be this almost hard suffering and like struggle. And it's like, that's not to say that like liberating a people or a group of, or a community or someone being oppressed is not saying that it's like that freedom won't ever look like that. But there's this heartfelt belief that the desire for freedom and the act of liberating should look a very specific way. And we see in the movie that while Beam, who is actively trying to find a way to save his save a girl from his village, there's a part in the movie where like when he actually does finally find himself at the house where she was kidnapped to, there's a party going on and he dances and enjoys himself at the party. Yes, like in his head, he actively knows what he's there to do and what he wants to do, but he still enjoys himself at the party. And then you have in the documentary, one of the Palestinian players was actually talking about how someone had like commented or messaged her and was like, how is this game that, because they were playing football or soccer for Americans, and they were like, how is this going to bring about liberation, or how is this going to do anything for what's happening in Palestine. And she said something really, really, I thought was really powerful, in that, like, showing that there is still the possibility of, like, life outside of the suffering is really, really important, and it's going to be powerful for the younger people behind her in Palestine to see and to bear witness to, because to only ever see or know hardship, I think, is going to make enduring and living and experiencing all these things that much more difficult. And so her talking about how, like, freedom for them doesn't only exist in what, like, freeing them from the what's happening by Israel, but also in freeing them from um, like the mindset of the suffering that they are experiencing. And she talks about, like, she just mentions how that's, like, it's possible for, like, freedom to look multiple ways. And I think that's something that is important to keep in mind, not just for those who are trying to help liberate other people, but for those who are also searching for or are part of communities that also need liberation. And yeah, like, liberation isn't going to always look one way, and it is okay for that to be the case. Something else that was really, really cool that was commented on both in the movie and in this documentary is the idea that, like, liberation also isn't a solo endeavor. So it is important to remember that you are not alone in this fight, in this desire for liberation for you and your community, or for you and this other community you recognize as being oppressed. You are not alone in that. Something that I thought was really powerful that happened in RRR is that Beam, so, like, for the majority of the movie, Beam is seeking to free a girl that was kidnapped from his village. And so that is, like, his main goal for the movie. And then, kind of a spoiler, but we find out later that Raj is actually hoping to liberate his entire village. And we see how being and realizing, he was like, I actually feel so selfish because I was only ever trying to save this one person, but you were trying to save multiple people. And it's really interesting to see him kind of make that connection, because you can see it kind of fills him almost with a type of sadness. And I thought it was really, really interesting and really, really cool that that was the case. That him acknowledging that, like, freedom and liberation is more than just what's immediately in front of you. And kind of like this sort of topic also appeared and happened in the documentary, in which they were talking about how, like, the freedom isn't just for them, especially if we go back to the girl who was kind of talking about, like, freedom can also be the freedom to dream of something beyond the apartheid that you're kind of experiencing, that, like, what she's doing by playing soccer and showing that, like, these other things are possible for the people in her city. And I think it is also really important that we remember that we are not alone in wanting liberation and wanting freedom and wanting to experience something outside of oppression, and that we are also allowed to seek help. Because that was something else that was also really, really powerful for me to witness in both the movie RRR and in Let It Bring Hope. Because in both of those things, we see, so, like, in Let It Bring Hope, we see Ireland, and we see them, like, bringing the Palestinian girls to Dublin in order for them to play a solidarity game. And we get to see even some of the behind the scenes footage of them, like, running into visa problems for one of the football players for the Palestinian team, because she is a refugee. And so like they're running into some mishaps and they're having to like actively kind of like be on the clock trying to correct it. And it's fascinating to see that like not only can we not do this alone, but like there are people who want to do what they can to help. And so honestly, it's always just a matter of finding those people. And then we see the same in RRR, in which Beam wants to do what he can to save this girl from his village, and he seeks out and gets help from people in that area who actively do also want to help him. And then we even see Raj also actively getting help from people who want to see him achieve his dream of liberation for his people as well. And so just remembering that like we are not alone in not only wanting liberation, but also not alone in pursuing it, I think is also going to be really, really important to remember and to keep in mind as we move forward. So maybe, just maybe, seeking liberation, desiring liberation, too can be an art like everything else. Alrighty, so for our last, and certainly not least, portion for today's episode is the Awe Moment. So for those new to the podcast, Awe Moment is just art of the week that made me think. And this week, especially with watching Let It Bring Hope, Bohemians versus Palestine, the poem If I Must Die by Refaat Alareer is the art that is most on my mind, especially because they read it aloud in the documentary, and it was a really, really powerful part of the episode. So I'm going to actually read it is here as well. And so the poem is If I Must Die by Refaat Alareer. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment, an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale. So that concludes that poem, but something that not only is the poem powerful and it's beautiful, but something I really, really liked about that poem is that, like, kind of back to what we were talking about for this episode, the liberation isn't ever only for us. Like, we're not alone in wanting liberation, and we're not alone in pursuing and desiring liberation. So Refaat Alareer was a professor, he was a poet, a writer, and an activist, and he wrote and shared so much before he was killed. And something that was really, really cool, that when this poem, after this poem, like people reshared this poem after his passing, and something that I thought was such a powerful moment was to see this poem translated by so many other languages. I saw it on Twitter, like I was on Twitter that day, watching as people would respond to or reply to like the tweet with what the poem would look like in their language or in their home language. And it was a really, really powerful moment, almost of solidarity, and to bear witness to and see just how powerful this desire for liberation can look, and how not alone we are in that desire. And it's something I've always kind of wanted to focus on and sort of enforce, if at the very least acknowledge, because I think it is important that we stand firm in the knowledge that we are not alone in this desire. Because the minute we think we're by ourselves, is oftentimes the minute it becomes the easiest to give up. And I don't think anyone should be giving up. But yeah, that's all I have for today's episode. Like, follow, subscribe. I'll be dropping all the resources and everything I discussed in the description box below. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, or follow the page and for any future content on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of the socials are on the screen, and they're also in the description box. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. Leave a comment letting me know what you think of today's episode. And yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.